I'm Heather from The Helpful Counselor, and this is the fifth and final installment of my 5-part free mini course on relational aggression. So throughout the course, we started off with defining what relational aggression is, and we went over some examples of nonverbal and verbal relational aggression. I also gave you a tried and true technique on how to determine if behavior is in fact relational aggression and what you should do when the relational aggression actually escalates into bullying behavior. In the second lesson, we looked at the motivating factors on the needs that kids try to satisfy: the need for power, the need for control, the need for security, and the need for safety, and why the lack of skills turns into maladaptive behavior, which is relational aggression. In the third lesson, we looked at the impact that relational aggression has not only on the target, but on the classroom as well, and also the longitudinal types of effects that relational aggression can have when it is internalized by the target. And the last one, number 4, we touched base on somewhat of a sensitive topic because we took a look at why we shouldn't be using mediation as our primary intervention when we're helping kids deal with relational aggression. So in this fifth and final lesson, I would like to cover the skill sets that students need to have in order to handle relational aggression and to be successful with that, or to avoid falling into the trap of maladaptive behaviors, with relational aggression being one of them. And the first skill set, and there's a lot of different skills within these skill sets, but we'll just sort of cover them in general, and I'll give you a couple different ideas. But the first one is communication. So students need to be able to have receptive communication skills. That is, they can interpret communication of other people, messages, whether that is expressed specifically or implied, and that can be through words or body language, innuendos, sarcasm, inferences, all that sort of thing. So to be able to be savvy and understanding and reading their peers and sort of understanding when, sort of they might be overextending their welcome and that kind of thing. So they can be able to pick and choose maybe groups of students that are more open and supportive, rather than, staying around friends or staying around a group of peers that may be more closed off or unwelcoming. So that is very, very crucial. And another part that they need to have for communication is to be able to express themselves accurately and effectively, and to be able to speak up and to set expectations for the people around them as well as their friends. And that can be as simple as having a few things that they can pull out of their back pocket, some statements they make when they are confronted with relational aggression. Say if somebody's telling them, if you don't do this, I'm not going to be your friend, they could just come up with, say something like, true friends don't treat each other like that. Boom. Like, it doesn't have to be this big old involved in-depth conversation. Certainly I statements have their place sometimes. With relational aggression, it's really tricky, because if the aggressor is trying to make someone feel bad and the I statement is, I feel hurt or I feel sad, when right away the aggressor's like, boom, I win, I got what I wanted, you feel like crap, and I'm successful. So rather than making an I statement, it's better to have a declarative statement that defines the expectation for that friendship or for that relationship, or for what that person who is being targeted, what they will tolerate, as well as for bystanders or people that are around other people that are displaying relational aggressive behaviors towards others, that they can have something real quick and easy that I call it, you pull out of your back pocket, just something that's ready to go that they don't have to think a lot about, something they feel comfortable with. And I like using friends don't treat each other like that, or that's not a nice way to treat somebody, or even just knock it off is a great thing to say rather than just saying nothing, because when there's silence is often interpreted as consent. So if someone doesn't speak up and say something, then the aggressor believes that everybody else is sort of on board with it. So communication skills is a big one. The next one is problem solving. Students need to have a process in order to, when they're confronted with a problem, with how do I go about solving this problem. School counselors are here to help kids with problems, but we're here for all students, and we can't be at all places at all times, and we can't help every student with every problem. My goal, and I teach this to even my littles, is that my goal is for them to be successful and independent, and as much as I love spending time with them and getting to know them, that it is great when they do not need me, because I know that they are using the skills that they have. And one of those skills is problem solving. And part of problem solving is to have a bag of tricks for conflict resolution. So say they are involved, they are being targeted or having a conflict with a friend where they are sort of, being singled out or made to feel unwelcome or excluded. And what can they do? What can they say? What are their options? So many times students feel stuck. And when they feel stuck, they're sort of like, trapped, sort of like on a spider's web, and they feel like they're just, really vulnerable. But if they can have a couple of options for what they can do if it happens in class, what they can do if it happens in an area outside of class, but in school cafeteria, library, recess if they're at the elementary age, or outside at home, like what are options that they can do? What are some choices that they can make? And one of those options should be a backup friend. So sometimes students get so caught up in having this one BFF where when that friendship doesn't work out, they feel like their whole world is falling apart. But if they feel like they're all alone, but if they know that there's this other person, even if it's not their first choice, but that they do have options, then that can be enough that can help them to get out of that situation and to go to be with somebody that is a safer choice to be around. And they also have to be able to set goals and to set actions, to determine actions to be able to reach a goal. And the goals and actions should only be what they themselves can control and do. They can't set something up where they want to be friends with Tamara, because Tamara might not want to be their friend, and they have to be able to be okay with that. And for some kids, that's really tough because that's the goal that they set in their mind. Well, you can't make someone else do something, and that includes be your friend. So if that friendship's not meant to be, they need to be able to assess how well they can achieve their desired goal and set up action steps for themselves, not for somebody else. And they need to be able to determine the success that they're making towards their goal. So they have to be able to stop and say, is this working? Is this not working? And to readjust. And that all takes time. I usually teach that and teach these skills through small group interventions. And the third skill that students need, and sort of taking from focusing on the one friend, is they have to have friendship skills and an understanding of how friendships work. And friendships, for example, friendships change over time. That's really hard for students to understand. They think, BFFs forever, and that, they're gonna, get married and have kids together and see themselves going to the same colleges and all that. But the truth of the matter is that's just not how friendships really work. If you look back, you might still be in contact with a handful of friends that you knew, going through school, or you might not even have the same friends. So friends ebb and flow, they change with our interests. And just because someone was friends with someone in third grade does not mean that they need to be spending the night at each other's house in fifth grade. Maybe that other student has developed different interests that the other student doesn't have, and they should have the freedom to be able to choose who their friends are and sort of, add to their friends and choose their own, what they want to do. But they need to own up to it, not to string anybody along, and not to, make promises that they don't follow through on. And kids need to understand what a true friend is. If someone's treating you like dirt, that's not a friend. They don't deserve your friendship, and you need to be able to find other friends. How do you find them? How do you make a friend? How do you keep a friend? And all that kind of stuff. And also levels of friendship. I mentioned how, kids want to latch on and have that BFF. Well, then they start to feel really competitive if any other friendship sort of, begins to blossom between their friend and somebody else. And then it creates this dichotomy where only two kids can get along, and we get into this friendship triangle that can get really difficult. And usually the student that has a hard time sharing the friend is going to ultimately lose out on that friendship, because the other friend is just going to get tired of having to, sort of argue and be controlled by the other person, that they'll just not be friends with them anymore. So they have to learn to share their friendships and learn the different levels of friends. And that is a skill that takes some time and practice. And then the fourth skill is self-efficacy, and that's a big one. That one covers their sense of self-concept, their ability to recognize and regulate emotions, and to be able to possess self-control and to be responsible for their own behaviors and actions and not blame others for their behavior. It has to do with establishing values and belief systems of how the world should work around them and how they function within that world. Sometimes students, especially students that have experienced trauma, develop these really distorted belief systems where loved ones, they learn early in life that loved ones hurt you. So if a friend treats them like garbage, they don't see it as any big deal, because they've had loved ones in their life that have hurt them far worse than that. So part of what we need to do is help them to challenge some of these distorted beliefs and cognitive distortions that they have, and get them to start taking on a healthier mindset of what friendship should look like and what their role is in these social circles and what they actually can offer their friends. And they're going to end up having much more rewarding friendships in return. Their friends are going to be much more supportive and nurturing, and it just won't seem like this constant, sort of fight for dominance that they've been relying on. Because when people feel confident in who they are and what they stand for, and they understand the value of a friend, and they know what it takes to be a good friend, and they know and value themselves enough to not accept garbage as far as treatment from somebody, and be able to establish boundaries, then that is really going to put the kibosh on this on again, off again friendship cycle that our students get caught up in. I mentioned it before that I typically address these skills in a tier 2 intervention groups with my students. If it is a student that sort of has a hard time making good choices, I try to limit the group to be a smaller group of maybe 4 to 6. If I was at middle school or high school, I would probably say even sometimes maybe 2 to 4 students. If I'm at the elementary level, it all depends on that student's sort of composition and the dynamics that it would affect in the group. I also run groups for kids that tend to be more targets. Maybe they need more self-esteem, and certainly aggressors, developing their sense of self and self-worth and all that is very important too. But I am very careful on how I place my students. I don't want to set students up to be victimized or for issues, specific stories or experiences to come up in group where other people that might not be aware of the situation are now brought into it, and it just re-victimizes everybody again. So you always want to proceed with the safety and security of all your students at all times, so that way they are able to open up and you are able to, sort of get it to the root of the matter and to be able to address it. Now, where the secret sauce comes in, because there are so many different skills that fall into all those different categories, is to develop a rubric, if you will, or some sort of an assessment that you can use to be able to identify what skill students are needs, sort of like a needs assessment, but have it tied just to those skills that I had mentioned. And as you are doing your planning, so say you've already met with them once, now you're meeting with them twice. After that second meeting, you should start to really consider whether they need a tier 2 intervention to be into a group. And that all is going to be based off of your interaction with the student and the history and all of that. But you're going to want to have a method so that way you can identify what skill sets they need, so you can plan purposefully and not just throw them into a friend group with a fun curriculum that maybe you purchased on Amazon or Teacher Pay Teachers. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but you should be very strategic in your planning and in your interventions that you choose, and all of that should be based on data. This isn't willy-nilly where we're just kind of going with our gut, and certainly our gut is going to tell us a little bit, but how are we going to decide when they've made progress? How is that determined? And I usually incorporate an assessment piece that I give to teachers, and then I have teachers once a month or every other week, depending on the severity of the situation. I have the teachers who see these students every day complete the assessment through a Google Doc, and I'm able to have everything there all digital, and all the teacher has to do is just sort of click on some buttons, so that way I can assess, are we making progress in these defined areas? Should I continue services? Do I need to change out interventions? Is it time to address a different skill set? And as you can imagine, with all the different skills and everything, that it can get a little complicated, but I want you to start thinking of, how you can start breaking those skills down on what resources you might already have to address some of those. And I created a download for you to be able to start kind of organizing what it is you have that you can use as interventions to teach those 4 different skills. You can incorporate these 4 skills before there's a problem and be proactive. And when you do your school-wide needs assessment, when you see that there's conflict resolution issues or problem solving issues, then this is when you teach whole school, so then you can front load your kids and load them up on all the information and give them strategies, so then when you meet them individually, you can say, oh, I was just in your classroom last week and we went over Kelso's choices for when you're dealing with conflict. What ones did you use? So that way you're giving the ownership back to the students that they need to be doing things to try to solve their problem, and they're not just saving everything for you and sort of being like, here's the hot mess, now help me fix it. So you want to Let students know that you are there to be helpful, but you are just part of the team, and that they are really in the driver's seat on who they choose to hang around with, the words they choose to use, and their actions that they exhibit. And with, the support of teachers and caregivers and your administration, and to be able to make sure that everybody's speaking the same language and that behaviors are not just sort of blown off or dismissed, out of hand, that you will be able to send the message that certain behaviors are not acceptable, and that you are able to teach the behaviors that you want to see in your building, and build that school climate. So there's really a lot there, and it's hard to go into every little bit and piece, and that's actually why I created my course for relational aggression, and I'll have some information below. I'm not going to do a hard sell on it. You can check it out as you will. If it's for you, that's great. I will just let you know that it does come with lifetime access to all the lessons and downloads, and there's a 50-page workbook for you as the student, as well as a really great activity pack that covers tons of activities to go through all the skill sets. There's assessments, there's paper assessments that you can download, print up, and I also included a version of my forms that I use through Google Drive that you can actually just click and copy right to your drive and use for assessments. And there's even a little piece on whole school planning and how to be able to address those skills when you do your guidance lessons. And we also have a Facebook group too, so we can chat, ask questions, and just sort of, lean on one another if we have any questions or things that might come up that we can learn from the community. If you have any questions, the best way to do that is to hit me up through the Helpful Counselors Facebook page, and you can just send me a message, and I usually respond to messages within a day or so. So it's just the best way to get a hold of me, because emails, honestly, I probably get about 100 plus emails a day, and I don't want to miss out if you're trying to ask me a question or that kind of thing. So I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you around. Until next time, take care.